Welcome to the third video of language and gamification. I am Mohammed and I will be talking about the research in this video. I wanted to do this one longer video, but I am going to split this video in two, and in the last part I will be talking about my dilemmas and challenging parts and what's actually difficult in designing in this specific way, and maybe that can help you in finding your own way of gamifying your project. But in this part I will be talking about research and in what way I did research. As it stands, doing research is actually something that's actually common with us and the way how we do it. But I think it's good to actually talk about it again and again, because I have seen around my peers that the way of doing research is not being done correctly, in my opinion. I have, let me go to the page. In my opinion, when doing research, more often than not, especially that I have seen around my peers, is that when you do research only in the broader spectrum. Like you have macro and micro stages of a certain problem. Often you have macro problems, like the bigger problems within a project that the client tells you about and wants you to be fixed. Like especially if it is about gamification, you have a client, like I talked about my previous video about KLM and about how they wanted to gamify their workflow, but they are kept talking about the macro side of the issue, and they kept about talking about how complex the whole structure is of their company and the hierarchy system and so on and so on. And when I saw with my peers and also with other groups, with other context tree groups, they kept looking at the site that the company was talking about, but didn't dig a little bit deeper when doing the research in what's actually the problem and where is the problem coming from. So with my research, the first thing that I did was, what is the handbook of the company itself? The mosque, or group from the mosque is doing. Like, what do they want to? They have made an education handbook. They've given me the education handbook in PDFs, and I have gone through it from page to page, and I have looked at how do they want the education to be given. And then I have done a enquete with the teachers that actually are giving the education, while also having that handbook in how to do the curriculum. And what you see is that it is for most of the mosque impossible to do the same amount of lessons the way how the organization wants, because the organization wants a classroom, like a school system, like classes which each different age has his own different teacher. But not every mosque has that many students or that many teachers that are capable of doing that. And with the enquete that I did with 70 different teachers, and in another I had even more teachers responses, which we found out that the age group are way too different, and way too less or way too much students, which is all over the place, and it's not possible to actually do a age by age different classrooms. Then when we go to the difficulty part of the language learning, I wanted to find out which part do the students find it most difficult. And here you have a graph where you can see a chart where you can see in percentage which one are more difficult. So the third part is the one that is widely seen as the notorious, the most difficult part of learning it, and that after you get that hurdle, the rest becomes a little more easier. And while doing that, I go back to the book, of course, and I double check in how does the book actually tackle this issue, and where do they lack in the explanation of that part, and what is that the students, the teachers, and the organization have in common or not in common. If I would do it like my peers, I would have made the gamification by taking the book and done a presentation like gamification like everyone else. Like that would be the first option that everyone would have done. And I also did that in the very beginning. That was my very first mistake, if you may, that I did. Why I looked only at the surface level and I didn't dig deeper. And I think that you will learn more if you dig deeper and try to find a problem with the situation instead of what they tell you that the problem is. And what I found here, the problem is that it has too many letters that the children felt too overwhelmed with it, so it needs to be split in different parts. Of course, with the research I continued, I looked up at the organization and asked if they are trying to tackle this, and they said they did, and they gave me a digital version of the book, and they called it the Z book, which is exactly the same as the normal book, with this time it's digitalized, which when you press on it, you get sounds on top of it with some mini games in it, which are not even presentation like games. It's sadly I am incapable of showing it because it is broken. I cannot open it. The server is closed. They closed the program, so I cannot enter the server and show you guys. But it was like, you see here a letter on the screen, and you had to throw a snowball on the letter if you heard the letter. It was even worse than drops, like I showed in a previous video. So that was the research, but like trying to find the actual problem and where I had to focus in fixing or making it as easier as possible without overwhelming the children. Then, of course, I looked at different language learning apps and how did they tackle it. And in the gamification part, we talked about the different types of gamification, about the presentation-like ones and the content-wise. And I had to make a decision in what part and what way did I want to do the gamifications, and what was the mistakes that those gamification tools showed. With a lot of the applications like Duolingo, Lingotier, and all the presentation like gamification, that what I had issues with specifically was in memorization of the certain groups, especially when you go to greetings, introduction. You have specific sentences that they use and it doesn't change. But if you introduce yourself, you can introduce yourself in way more than 20, 30, 40 ways with different names, different place, and so on and so on. But they don't use those amount because they probably want to keep it short as possible. But that also like backfires a little bit in my opinion. And the same goes with Lingodeer. You go to nationalities, you go to lesson 1, and as you can see here, you see Japanese. You see the image already before. You don't need to learn Japanese to actually know the answer. So in my opinion, it felt too simple, and it lacked the difficulty part of actually learning it. So that was what Duolingo was lacking in my opinion. Then you had a other app that I found very inspiring to actually in my search of finding an application. That was the Can you study? Can you study was actually, in a way, something that I wanted to use, especially with multiple choice questions. In you have cards and you have to press something and you get an answer, correct, not correct. I'm just pressing here without looking. And what you had here is it shows you what you did good, what you didn't good, and then you can select the wrong ones, and you can put the wrong ones in a other cards system where you can learn those again. So that was something that I found very interesting, but what it lacked was grammar. That was purely the letters recognition. So that was something that I found important, because in the research I needed to find a specific goal. What did I want to achieve? And from who am I doing it? So I'm doing it for children. What do I want to achieve? I want the children to understand the Quran Arabic instead of